On a cold fall afternoon in Chicago, dry leaves scraped along the cracked sidewalks, circling around bus stops and puddles like tired dancers. Mateo, who had just turned 11 a few weeks ago, stood alone by the curb, hugging his beat-up history, textbook close to his chest. He'd already been waiting for over 20 minutes, but he didn't really notice the time anymore. The school bus was always late on Fridays. What kept him grounded was the quiet, the kind where you could hear your own breathing and not much else. But the calm didn't last. 2 police officers walked up from the corner, their boots crunching the leaves. Mateo looked up. He wasn't scared, not right away. The taller one, Officer Daniels, gave a short nod. The other, Officer Reed, a woman with sharp eyes, asked what he was doing out alone. When he calmly explained that he was waiting for his bus and that his mom couldn't be there because she was deployed with the Army Special Forces, something shifted. Officer Reed laughed loudly. "Women don't serve in the Green Berets, sweetheart," she scoffed. Mateo's lips moved to argue, but his throat closed up. The shame came fast, not from what they said, but from knowing they didn't believe him. Before another word could be thrown at Mateo, the sound of steady boots approached from up the block, crisp against the pavement. His eyes darted toward the street, and there she was, his mom, Master Sergeant Lauren Thompson. She walked with the kind of calm that made people straighten up without knowing why. Her uniform, perfectly pressed, caught the late afternoon light, with its edges and insignia sharp against the grey sky. The patch on her chest read Special Forces, and her presence shifted the entire air around them. Officer Reed's smug grin froze. Before she could say anything else, Sergeant Thompson stopped just a few feet away, held up her ID, and said clearly, "United States Army, Master Sergeant Lauren Thompson, Special Forces." Silence dropped like a weight. The male officer looked down, suddenly fidgeting with his belt. Mateo stepped closer to his mum, his chest rising a little higher. For the first time that day, he could feel his pride, not hidden behind books or swallowed by doubt, but standing tall next to him. Reed didn't apologize. She didn't say anything. Her stare dropped to the sidewalk where the wind pushed one last leaf past her boots. And that said enough. Later that evening, the two of them sat outside a small neighborhood ice cream shop, the kind with neon signs and tiny plastic tables that wobbled a bit if you leaned on them too hard. Mateo had a scoop of mint chocolate. Chip and his mom went with classic vanilla. For once, she wasn't wearing the uniform. No boots, no tight hair bun, just jeans, a hoodie from her old base, and a quiet smile. They didn't talk much at first. The street was calm, with only a few cars passing by and some kids playing down the block. Mateo let his ice cream melt a little in the cup. He swirled it with his spoon, his thoughts still stuck on everything that had happened earlier that day. Then, softly, he asked, "Did you always know you'd make it, like become what you are now?" His mom looked over at him and gave one of those small, knowing smiles. "I never needed to know for sure," she said. "Just needed a reason." Something about the way she said it stayed with him, and right. Then Mateo began to see her strength differently, not just in medals or missions, but in how she held herself steady no matter who doubted her. The next morning came early. Still half asleep, Mateo sat at the kitchen table while his mom checked through her gear one last time. Her backpack was lined up at the door, her boots spotless, uniform sharp, everything just as it always was. She moved with quiet focus, tying, her hair back tight and clicking her watch into place. When she finally turned to him, she crouched down, kissed his forehead gently, and said, 3 days. I'll be back before you miss me too much." He gave a quick nod, pretending to be cooler than he felt. Watching her step out the front door never got easier, but this time something inside him felt different. Worry and pride sat side by side. in his chest. He stood by the window until she disappeared down the block, the rhythm of her boots fading into the silence. By mid-morning, it was just him and Grandma Rosa in the house. She wore her usual faded house sweater and had already made 2 mugs of coffee, one for herself, one mostly milk for Mateo. As they sat together, she started telling old stories about his mom. How, even as a little girl, she was stubborn, smart, and always stood up for what was right. Mateo listened closely, quietly smiling. Suddenly, those same traits didn't feel like flaws. They felt like home. Back at school, things felt a little different. Mateo noticed the stares in the hallway, those quick side glances when people thought he wasn't looking. A few kids whispered behind their lockers, and during recess, Ryan Miller, a boy who never missed a chance to jab, walked up with that usual smirk. "So your mum's like, what, some kind of superhero now?" Ryan asked, loud enough so the others nearby could hear. But this time the words didn't sting. Mateo didn't flinch or fumble for a comeback. He just smiled, calm and easy, then turned back to his math book. The teasing landed differently now. It was empty noise, without weight. He didn't need everyone to believe him. He knew the truth, and that was enough. 3 days later, just like she said, his mom came back. This time, she surprised him by picking him up right after the last bell. She stepped onto the sidewalk in full uniform, her name patch and stripes neatly in place. A few students gasped. Others stood frozen. Ryan, standing nearby, didn't speak. He just watched her, blinking like he couldn't quite figure out what to feel. Respect sat quietly behind his silence. Mateo saw it, and for once, he didn't feel small at all. A few days later, while waiting for the bell to ring, Mateo noticed a flyer taped to the wall near his classroom. It was printed in big blue letters and read, "Write about your hero. Submissions due next Friday." His eyes stayed on it longer than he meant to. At first, he wasn't sure. His mom had always told him she didn't do what she did for awards or attention. "I just do the work," she'd say, usually while folding laundry or sipping coffee before dawn. But something tugged at him, not because he wanted others to know, but because he needed to say it for himself. That night, with his notebook open and the kitchen quiet, he started writing in short bursts. Not everything came easily, but the words began to shape a picture. He didn't write about battlefield missions or medals. Instead, he wrote about the way she packed his lunch, even on the mornings she had to leave early, about the way she watched quietly when he struggled with homework, letting him ask for help instead of jumping in. He wrote about how someone could be strong without being loud, and sentence by sentence, he found the story he needed to tell. A few weeks later, on a breezy Saturday morning, Mateo walked to the corner market to pick up a loaf of bread and some eggs for breakfast. The sun was out, and a few people were gathered near the entrance, chatting about weekend plans and little league scores. As he reached for the shopping cart, he noticed her. Officer Reed, the same officer from that tense afternoon outside his house. She was standing a few steps away, out of uniform, looking unsure for once. He nearly kept walking, but she caught his eye. "Hey, Mateo," she said, her voice quieter than he remembered. "Got a minute?" He stopped, gripping the handle of the cart. She stepped closer, but didn't rush. "I was wrong that day," she said, straight to the point. "There's no excuse. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Mateo didn't say anything at first. He looked at her, really looked, and something in her face seemed different. Less edge, more honesty. He gave a small nod instead of a reply, one hand still on the cart. Then he walked. Inside, he didn't feel like he had to win any fight. He just felt steady, like being himself was finally enough. A few days after his run-in at the market, Mateo was called into the front office during lunch. The secretary told him the principal, Mrs. Connors, wanted a quick word. He wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked down the hall, unsure of what was coming. Inside her office, she offered him a tight smile and motioned for him to sit across from her polished desk. "I wanted to bring up the situation with the officers a few weeks ago," she began, her tone careful, like she was choosing every word for an official email. "I understand it may have been a misunderstanding." Matteo blinked. For a second, he thought he heard her wrong. She went on, talking about how the school cared for its students and how perceptions could be tricky. But Matteo wasn't really listening anymore, the way she avoided calling it what it was. That bothered him more than he expected. He sat up straighter and said calmly, "It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a mistake." That stopped her. Mrs. Connors glanced down, then nodded slowly, but didn't say much else. Walking back to class, Matteo didn't feel angry, he just felt clear. He didn't need noise to be heard, only truth. A few weeks after that quiet conversation in the principal's office, Matteo was sitting on the couch when his phone started buzzing over and over. He picked it up and saw messages from classmates, even a few kids he didn't usually talk to. Someone had uploaded a video, footage from that day outside his house. Recorded by a stranger walking past, it showed everything: the shouting, the cops forcing him to the ground, and then clearly his mother stepping in, calm, sharp, in uniform, identifying herself. That moment, her presence, her command, hit differently on camera. The video spread fast. Comments filled up every post. At first, there were the usual ugly takes, but they were quickly shut down. His mom's quiet strength in that clip silenced a lot of people. News outlets picked it up. Conversations exploded online about women in the military, about race, about truth. Organizations, including the American Civil Rights Partnership, started speaking out in support. One statement read, "This is why stories like Matteo's matter." And yet nothing really changed at home. The dishwasher still hummed after dinner. Matteo still packed his school bag before bed. Grandma Rosa still told her stories like nothing had shifted. In that mix, the noise faded and the meaning stayed. Not long after the video made its rounds online, Matteo got called into the office. Again, this time not for a conversation, but for a request. The school was planning an assembly for Women's History Month, and the principal asked if his mom could come in to speak. They wanted her on stage for the assembly, maybe to share her experience or say something about service and leadership. Mrs. Connors mentioned how inspiring it could be for other students. Matteo brought it up at dinner that night, expecting his mom to brush it off, and she did, just not in the way he thought. She simply said, "That's not what I do it for, you know. I'm no symbol. I just work and come home. That's enough." Matteo pressed a little, telling her people might want to hear from someone like her. She smiled kindly and shook her head. "Being who I am already says what needs to be said." The school followed up twice more, even offered to let her skip the stage and just appear in a short video. But her answer didn't change. Watching her handle it, Matteo saw something he hadn't fully noticed before. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground. Weeks had passed, but the moment in front of the market kept playing in Officer Reed's mind. The way Matteo had looked at her, not with fear but with something else, something quieter, and how his mother didn't show up in the news for her anger, but for her steadiness. That stuck with her. One morning, after roll call at the precinct, Reed stayed behind and asked her supervisor if she could run a short internal session, just a half hour, on bias and how it plays out in the field. The reaction was exactly what she expected, doubtful at best. "We already do annual training," someone said. Another officer mumbled, "Sounds political." But Reed held her ground. She pitched it again that Friday and the week after, until the captain finally gave her a green light. One date, one room, no promises on attendance. When the day came, only about a dozen officers showed up. But Reed, Didn't care. She spoke plainly. She told the story, her part in it, the mistake she made. Then she talked about Private Regina Morales, about everything people didn't see, just because they weren't looking hard enough. She ended with a quiet thank you. And in that small room, something finally shifted. The following week, Mateo sat at his desk, hunched over his notebook, trying to finish the writing assignment for the school's annual reflection day. Every 8th grader had to submit an essay, and some would be read aloud during the program. The topic was, "What strength means to me." At first he didn't want to write anything deep, just enough to check the box. But the words started coming, and once they did, he couldn't stop. He wrote about his mom, about what he saw in her every day. He wrote about how some people think strength is about being loud or winning arguments. But his mom taught him something else entirely. The essay ended with, "My mother taught me that courage isn't yelling, it's continuing, and that sometimes the greatest strength is saying nothing at all." A week later, when the teacher read it out loud in class, Mateo's hands were shaking under the desk. He didn't look up until it was over. There was a softness in Mr. Lewis's voice when he folded the paper. "That," he said, "was something." The room was quiet for a beat. Then the class clapped. Mateo's piece was picked for the school showcase, but what mattered most was that every word came from him. Honest, steady, true. A few months later, a formal letter arrived in the mail. It was thick, with a golden seal, and addressed to Staff Sergeant Regina Morales. Inside was an invitation to a medal ceremony at the Pentagon. The letter explained that she'd been selected to receive the Distinguished Service Medal for her leadership and her years of duty, shaped not just by what she'd done in her uniform, but by how she carried herself when the spotlight wasn't on. Regina read it twice and left it on the kitchen table for a few days, unsure of what to feel. She didn't seek praise. Most days, she just wanted to get through the work, cook dinner, and make sure Mateo got enough sleep. But one evening, as she moved around the kitchen, Rosa, Mateo's grandmother, looked up from peeling potatoes and quietly said, "Sometimes letting people honor you is part of the job too." So on the day of the ceremony, she pulled out her dress blues, the same uniform she kept neatly folded in her closet, and ironed them with care. Her stomach turned the whole ride there. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, eyes searching until they landed on Mateo's face in the crowd. He smiled. That was enough. She didn't read her prepared notes. She just said, "Thank you," with calm, with steadiness. The room stood to applaud. Still, the true medal, she believed, was waiting at home, in the quiet strength of raising her son. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Officer Dana Reed pulled into the driveway of the Morales home. She had called earlier in the week, leaving a simple message. No long introduction, no excuse, just, "I'd like to stop by if that's all right." Regina had told her it was fine, though she wasn't sure what to expect. When Dana stepped onto the porch, the air was thick with things not yet said. Regina opened the door, nodded once, and stepped aside. They didn't sit in the living room. Instead, they stood in the kitchen by the counter, just a few feet apart. The conversation was short. Dana said thank you, not the kind of thank you people toss around, but one that meant, "You checked me, and I needed that." She didn't use pretty words. She didn't apologize the way some folks do just to feel better. She simply owned it. Regina didn't respond right away. She just looked her in the eye, steady and calm. That look held no anger, only clarity. Both women understood the weight of what it takes to stand your ground. Before Dana left, they exchanged no ranks, no titles, just names. And that was enough. In that moment, something unspoken quietly settled between them, a shared understanding to do better. Back at school, things started to shift. Mateo noticed it first in the way some of the other kids looked at him. Not with pity, not with fear, just respect. Nothing spoken, just different. He stayed the same, though, focused on his work, kept to his small circle, and stayed after class when he needed help. One afternoon, while packing up his books, Justin Nguyen, who used to tease him during lunch or roll his eyes during group projects, hovered nearby holding a history textbook. He didn't say much, just tapped the book once and looked at Mateo. With this quiet expression, like he was asking without words, Mateo held his gaze for a second and then nodded. "Library at 4. Justin nodded back and walked off. They sat across from each other later that day, 2 chairs pulled up to a corner table. Mateo explained timelines and names, flipping pages and pointing things out. Justin listened. No jokes, no mockery, just listening. By the second week, they'd found their rhythm. They started laughing at random stuff, tiny things, like the way their teacher mispronounced Napoleon or when the printer jammed again. Mateo's mom always said that real strength wasn't about scoring points. It was about showing up again and again. That's what he was learning now. Around the start of spring semester, the American Center for Fair Policing reached out to Jefferson Middle School with a proposal. They wanted to work with the administration to update the school's response protocols, how to handle situations with students, how to listen before reacting, and how to make sure staff understood the weight of their actions. Mateo's story, though never sensationalized, had made its way into quiet conversations across the district. Now it was being used as a case study, not to single anyone out, but to open eyes. Over the next few months, teachers and school staff attended workshops on active listening, cultural awareness, and what real inclusion means in a diverse campus. Some were skeptical at first, unsure why they needed the extra training. But as they talked and shared stories, something started shifting, not all at once, but steadily. Mateo noticed it in little things. A teacher pausing to ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. The counselor checking in with kids who were usually ignored. No big speeches, no sudden change, but movement. He didn't walk around feeling heroic. That was never the point. But seeing how his experience helped the school grow taught him something lasting. Being heard, really heard, might be one of the strongest things there is. On the morning of Mateo's 13th birthday, Regina filled out the leave request. Without hesitation, it had been a long stretch of back-to-back shifts and weekend drills, and for once she wanted a full day with no calls, no reports, no uniform, just them. By 10 o'clock they were walking through Rock Creek Park with ice cream cones in hand. Chocolate for him, vanilla swirl for her. The city noise faded behind the trees, and for a few hours, everything slowed down. They found a quiet spot near the edge of the hill where the view opened up. Mateo leaned back on the grass while Regina sat, legs stretched out, letting the breeze brush across her face. As the sun started dipping low, painting the sky in soft orange, she turned to him and said, "Today, I'm not Staff Sergeant Morales. I'm just your mom." Mateo grinned and replied, "That's your toughest job anyway." They both laughed and then just sat together without needing to say more. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of shared warmth. As the sky turned darker, a single star appeared. They both looked up. That star, quiet and steady, was the same wherever they were. And in that small, shining point, they felt something strong, something that no distance, no time could ever loosen. By early August, Regina started feeling a pull she couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't that she stopped believing in the work she did. Serving had shaped her, made her strong, but something inside had shifted. Mateo was growing fast. 13 already. His questions were deeper, his silences heavier, and his laugh, when it came, felt rarer. She didn't want to miss those things by showing up only halfway. After a week of thinking quietly and talking, Things through with her mom at the kitchen table, Regina requested an extended leave from the National Guard. It wasn't a quick decision, and it wasn't easy. She had spent over 15 years putting on the uniform, answering calls, and leading her team. But when she told her commanding officer, he didn't need convincing. "You're just changing posts," he said, and she smiled. At home, she boxed up the ready bags and cleared space on the kitchen counter for school supplies. The old go bag hooks near the front door now held Mateo's backpack and a jacket. Books sat open on the table, and he started watching her differently, carefully, quietly. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't split between worlds. She was fully there, and somehow he felt whole just knowing it. During the final week of school, the energy in the hallways was lighter. Posters were coming down. Yearbooks were getting signed, and the countdown to summer had begun. But at the assembly that Friday morning, things slowed down. Principal Harris stepped up to the mic in the school auditorium, holding a folded sheet of paper. The room settled, just shy of totally quiet. Then he said, "Before we go, I want to share something written by one of our own." No names, no intro, just the essay. As he read Mateo's piece aloud, about dignity and assumptions and the quiet power of staying true to yourself, the room grew still. There was no fidgeting, no side talk, just students and teachers listening. Really, listening. When it ended, the applause was soft at first, then steady. No cheering, no standing ovations. Just an honest response to honest words. Mateo walked off the stage calmly. He didn't wave, didn't smile wide. That wasn't the point. Later, Miss Thompson pulled him aside near the lockers. "You taught me something today," she said. He nodded, one quiet thank you. Outside, the breeze carried a cool hint of fall, even though summer was days away. That same wind months ago had stung during his hardest moment. Now it felt different. The year had circled around, and somehow it had opened up too. That evening, the house was filled with warm smells and quiet sounds. Mateo stood beside his abuela at the stove, slicing onions while she stirred a big pot of arroz con pollo. He moved slowly, careful not to mess up her rhythm, not just in the food, but in the way she held the kitchen together. Across the living room, Regina was folding a fresh load of laundry on the couch, sleeves and socks moving through her hands like muscle memory. The television was on, low enough that no one really noticed what it was saying. It wasn't about the screen anyway. It was about the calm that had settled in. No one was rushing out the door. No one was taking a call mid-dinner. It was an ordinary night, and that's what made it feel like a treasure. Mateo paused and looked toward his mom. "Did you know," he asked, "that one day things would be different?" She didn't stop folding. "I didn't know," she said softly, "but I believed." He smiled, looked out the window where that same star hung low in the sky, always there, always steady. Not every hero wears a cape. Some wear boots, and some just carry a quiet kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud.